In a stunning turn of events, Syrian rebels have ousted President Bashar al-Assad, who's fled to Moscow after 13 years of civil war. The streets of Damascus erupted in celebration as the opposition took control, signaling a new era for Syria. Amidst the chaos, Israel has moved tanks into Syria to curb potential threats. International powers are now scrambling to navigate the seismic shift in Middle Eastern politics. It is a real crisis indeed.
In less than 2 weeks, Syria's history has been altered. President Bashar al-Assad, whose brutal regime killed tens of thousands and displaced over 7 million internally, has fled to Russia after opposition forces romped to Damascus at a lightning pace. Assad's ouster has brought in much-needed relief to people who spent their lifetime under the nose of the decades-long family regime. The reactions echoed across the globe as thousands of Syrians celebrated the fall of Assad, singing and waving flags. They chanted slogans against the ousted Syrian president and his father, Hafez.
It's like tears of happiness like today. It's like we didn't imagine. I lost my family. I lost my father, mother, brother. I lost many of my friends in Syria for this day. I wanted to celebrate this day in Syria today.
Meanwhile, world leaders have mostly hailed Assad's ouster, but stopped short of celebrating as they seek stability in the war-torn nation. US President Joe Biden has said that it's a historic opportunity, but also termed it a moment of risk and uncertainty. On the other hand, India has called for a peaceful and inclusive Syrian-led political process to bring stability to that country. Meanwhile, US President-elect Donald Trump has urged the outgoing US administration to stay out of the Syria conflict. According to reports, the US is trying to work out what comes next and who rules over Syria. Washington is worried that the power vacuum could be filled by something that is not desirable, a power grab by Islamist insurgents, including factions designated as terrorists by the US. The end of the Assad family's 5-decade rule is set to reshape the balance of power in the region. Iran, one of Assad's biggest backers, has suffered another significant blow to its influence in the region. There are big questions being asked over Russia's influence as well, considering the fact that Assad clung to power owing to Moscow's intervention in 2015. The stunning rebel offensive has threatened to eliminate Moscow's foothold in the region. At this moment, there appears to be an uneasy calm in Syria. The question hanging like a Damocles sword is, how long will this last? With Vishal Vivek, Bureau Report, NDTV World.
And speaking to the Indian community in Bahrain, the External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar spoke about India's stance on the conflict in West Asia. He reiterated his support for a two-state solution in the Israel-Palestine conflict and called for respect for humanitarian laws. Listen in.
India has also been contributing to the UN UNRWA, UNRWA, which is the primary relief agency in respect of the Palestinians. And India has supplied relief material to Palestine, to the Palestinian Authority, through Egypt. We have also given medicines, medical relief to Lebanon because of the fighting and the casualties which have taken place there. And at the end of the day, we do believe that there must be a solution to the Palestinian issue, because if there is not one, that will always remain the cause of instability in this region. So we do support a two-state solution.
All right, well, joining us to look at the situation in Syria, in the latest crisis in West Asia, Robert Dobbs is an expert on intelligence and counter-terrorism. Dr. Shubhda Chaudhary, founder of the Middle East Insights platform, and Ambassador Prabhu Dayal. Thank you all very much for being with us. Robert Dobbs, there's the Syrian Democratic Forces, the SDF, the YPG, the HTS, the SNA, many forces. The big question, who's in charge?
Well, I think that's the whole problematic issue here we have, that you look at for about 14 years, the rebel forces basically had no ability to, gain really any significant ground in Syria. And then within a month, all of a sudden we see this dramatic shift. And I think it begs to question some of the real motives of the current administration in the United States government, and in creating more instability in the Middle East. We've seen in Libya, we've seen in Afghanistan, we've seen in Iraq that when you take out these power vacuums, the devil you knew was better than the devil you didn't. And I think overall that this becomes a very problematic issue for the Trump administration, especially, if there is some CIA involvement, which likely there is, that they keep playing this chessboard that they don't really win the game of chess.
Another question for you, Mr. Dobbs. Abu Muhammad al-Julani, of late, the leader, ostensibly the leader of the struggle which got rid of the regime, as it were, he's had a link to the Al-Qaeda in the past. He's tried to reconstruct his identity in the sense that he's sort of projecting himself as somewhat of a moderate. Is that something one can believe?
I don't believe so. I mean, it's like saying there's a moderate Taliban. We found out from that whole experience that there is no moderate Taliban. They call Daesh Al-Qaeda, right? They are what they are, basically monsters and animals in that region. And we're terrorizing the civilian population, especially, you could say the non-kind of extremist Sunni Muslims, mainly Christians, Kurds, others in the area, Alawites. And we're just causing complete chaos in the region. And now we look at that somehow, they're going to be reformed, which I highly doubt.
Yeah. Dr. Shubhda Chaudhary, in the power vacuum which presently exists in Israel, in Syria, there's also Israel and Turkey, both of whom have an important role. Turkey in the north, perhaps a force which helped in triggering what we've seen in Syria, and of course Israel as well, and we've seen important statements by Prime Minister Netanyahu. How do you see Israel potentially reacting over the next period of time on the developments in Syria?
Thank you so much for calling me. And actually, there is a power vacuum in terms of civil society in Israel. But coming to the question of Turkey and Israel, look, Turkey today started bombing the Kurdish northeastern side of Syria. 20 Kurds were killed, 40 were deeply injured. The Turkish issue is because Turkish foreign policy and Syrian policy did not see eye to eye even after reconciliation. Putin was trying very hard to make the ends meet somehow. He failed. That is one of the reasons why Bashar al-Assad is in Russia, but Putin has not met him till now, even if they have granted him asylum and his family. So Erdogan basically wants to displace off all the millions of Syrian refugees who came to Turkey over the period of time. Idlib obviously has the control of HTS because that is from where they started in 2020, but the Turkish armed forces are also involved. On the other hand, Israel has already invested $60 billion in the past 14 months. And they took over Golan Heights. There is an Israeli flag at Mount Hermon. They went 14 kilometers more, entered into Konetria and Kahania and all other regions. They have been bombing today Dera, Tartus, Latakia, where the Russian bases are actually involved. Prime Minister Netanyahu, where in Israel there's a massive media censorship. He spoke in Hebrew and he said that Israel is ready to give an olive branch to Kurds and to Druze and to Ismailis and to all the Muslims who want to live in peace with Israel. But he did not say Syrians.
Right, and
He
that's
did
an
not say
important
that.
point. And Israeli soldiers have also moved into places vacated by the Syrian army. So there is,
Yes.
the entire issue of boundaries, which is a huge issue. Ambassador Dayal, Iran, it appears, has been left weaker, not just because of the developments in Syria, but also because of Israel's relative success against Hamas and Hezbollah. In all of this, is Iran the ultimate loser?
There is no doubt that Iran has lost out in whatever has happened in Syria. Let me mention that the internal regime change in Syria has brought out a very speedy power balance change in the Middle East region. The Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which has been in the forefront of the regime change and whose leader, Mohammad al-Julani, is really trying to put things in peace in Damascus. He is very hostile to Iran. And the reason for that is that Iran was backing Bashar al-Assad and the Hezbollah was sending its soldiers to fight for Bashar al-Assad. So, neither is the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham well disposed towards Iran, nor is it well disposed towards Hezbollah. Now, if you look at the map of the region, it's very interesting. Immediately to the west of Iran is Iraq, then after that to the west is Syria, and then Lebanon. So the weapon supplies to the Hezbollah from Iran were being routed through Syria. Now, with the regime change, that is not going to be possible. So there is going to be an automatic weakening of the Hezbollah. And of course, there is also the diminishing of the power of the Iranians, because now they don't have a friendly power in Syria. They don't have their ally Bashar al-Assad. They have somebody who is hostile, because there is no doubt that the new leadership in Damascus is hostile to Iran.
Right.
Israel is happy. Israel is very happy with these developments.
All right,
because it
Ambassador, just
weakens
give me
the
1
Hezbollah.
second. I wanted to go back to Robert Dobbs. Mr. Dobbs, did anybody really expect Syria to collapse as fast as it did?
Well, I think once you've seen the motions going into effect, you knew what was going to happen. And I would really get back at why Bashar Assad went towards Iran in the first place. He was actually running covert black sites to interrogate terrorism suspects for the CIA. And the US government is the one that pushed Bashar Assad away. And you can even hear in speeches by Muammar Gaddafi to the Arab League that kind of got into all this, that it just seems that all the Arab leaders that tended to interact with the CIA in the end all end up dead or expelled from their governments. And I think that's one thing that we're failing to realize here, is that we're pushing these leaders into the arms of what we call the enemy, right? When in fact we could be working with them much more closely and have a greater impact as far as economics and even intelligence and military strategies as well. Just like with Russia, Russia is not our enemy. Russia is should be looked at as an opponent, right? A respectful opponent that you can sit down and work things out. But you have the neoconservatives and neoliberals in Washington, D.C. that want to keep this constant forever war going on.
Mr. Dobbs, speaking about Russia and their bases in Syria, which are absolutely critical for their strategic presence, what happens now? Do you believe that Russia would entirely be forced to entirely vacate their positions in Syria where they've been fighting for so many years?
Well, you've seen that already, that they have been removing troops and equipment and everything from Syria because they know the end game of this with these Islamist groups. They're not going to ally with the Russians. That's almost the natural enemy of the Russians. And the Russians and, Vladimir Putin, he is not going to, if you want to say, lay down with the Islamists either, because of his own internal security for Russia and all that as well.
Dr. Chaudhary, are you able to identify any possible contours which a political formation in Syria may take?
Yes, sir. But first of all, I would like to say that just a couple of hours before, as we are talking about CIA, there was an unidentified CIA spacecraft over Erbil in Iraq. No one knows why it is there. Erbil is a Kurdish region in Iraq. Coming to your question, right now the Salvation State government of Jolani, his real name is Ahmad al-Shirra, and he's from Golan Heights. His father and they had been imprisoned. He went and fought against 2003 invasion of Iraq by US. Has a very strong Palestinian sympathy. At the same time, the prime minister that they have chosen right now, Mohammed Bashir, who was born in 1983, Mohammed Bashir is an electrical engineer, but in 2021, he also took a law degree from Idlib University in Sharia.
I see.
Now that is something which is very interesting. Because if Sharia law as a jurisprudence is going to govern Syria, then we know that the minorities will not be safe. Secondly, Jolani has not responded. He has responded against Iran. He has spoken against Iraq. Ayatollah Khamenei is going to address on December 11th, though he is carrying on the same rhetoric that the Zionist regime is over. At the same time, there's one thing that we have to take into consideration, that in Syria and in most of the Middle Eastern West Asian countries, Mukhabarat, which is military intelligence, is very strong. And Bashar al-Assad's younger brother, Maher al-Assad, was the head of the military intelligence unit. No one knows where he is.
All right. Well, we'll leave it over there. I'd like to thank you all very much for being with us and sharing all of those details.